welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm McKelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 4 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin.
Hey, you got all that right that time.
I did, that was perfect. Today we're discussing chapter 3 of A Game of Thrones, Daenerys 1. How's things?
Good. You recovered? You've had a long night and morning?
I have, yeah. I went to see a band last night, the band Ride from England.
Cool.
R-I-D-E.
Yeah.
And I've just finished watching Derry Girls on Netflix, and so I kept calling them Royd. Royd. I thought it was funny.
Well, while you were out partying, I was watching Aladdin with my daughter. So we both had pretty raucous nights, I feel like.
I may talk too loud because my ears are ringing from how loud it was.
I'll rein you in if you start shouting.
Good. All right, we'll start with a summary of the chapter. Then what we'll do for the rest of the podcast is we discuss what we think of it. We'll provide you with some useful background information that you might not know, and not that it will spoil it for you, but it'll help to sort of color things in. A quick bit of pedantry. There isn't much this time. Notes and corrections from previous episodes. Yes, it was bound to happen. Wow. And we'll finish with some listener mail.
Yeah.
Exciting.
We've got mail.
Yeah. So we'll start with our usual summary of the chapter. Over to you, McKelly.
All right. We find the last Targaryens, Daeny, age 13, and her brother Viserys, age 21, in the home of Illyrio Mopatis, a magister of Pentos on the continent of Essos. Daeny is getting ready to attend a party at the manse of Khal Drogo, the leader of the feared Dothraki tribe. Viserys hopes that Drogo, the leader of a 100,000-strong army, will ask to wed Daeny tonight, cementing an alliance that is crucial to Viserys' ambitions. Daeny is careful not to upset her brother due to his temper. After Viserys leaves, Daeny reminisces about her life to this point and how she ended up here. She recalls the story of Viserys and their pregnant mother fleeing King's Landing at the end of Robert's rebellion, Daeny's birth on Dragonstone and her mother's dying in childbirth, their eventual escape to Essos under the care of Sir Willem Darry, the series of places they lived and had been forced to flee, afraid of the usurper Robert's assassins at every turn. Viserys insists that the threat is real, but Daeny is skeptical. During the ride to the Khal's manse, Viserys dreams of reclaiming his throne. At the party, while Magister Illyrio goes to get Khal Drogo, Daeny gets cold feet and begs her brother to leave and go home. Viserys tells Daeny that he would let Khal Drogo's whole Khalasar have relations with her to get the army he needs to take the Iron Throne. Daeny stiffens her resolve and prepares to meet her future husband.
So, yeah, that's it. It's the longest chapter we've read so far, but actually when you summarize it, not an awful lot happens, really.
Right. A lot of reminiscing.
Reminiscing is most of it, yeah. But there are Targaryens. I mean,
yes, they survive.
Yes, they're not wiped out.
It's like cockroaches, you can't kill them all.
Well, arguably, these could be the good guys.
Right, yes. Yes.
But the cockroaches may be the good guys.
True.
Perhaps
in their minds.
We're the vermin.
Yeah.
Actually, I killed a cockroach in my house the other day, and it took me so many swipes at this thing that my wife shouted, is it a small amphibian? It took me like 12 swipes at this thing.
Those palmetto bugs, for those who don't live in our neck of the woods, you might not be familiar with.
But I was
bugs.
telling someone that story yesterday, one of the people who went to the concert with me, and they said, it's not a palmetto bug, it's a roach. I was like, okay.
Yes, palmetto bugs are American cockroaches, but they are not the infestation kind like German cockroaches.
I feel a lot more.
Yes.
I did not know.
Well, when we first moved here, we had a palmetto bug in the house, and Stacy was like, ah! And so we brought the orchid man in, and he was like, yeah, that's just a palmetto bug. And he explained the difference to me.
That's very exciting.
You do not have an infestation of cockroaches in your house.
Good to know.
But those things move fast. Those.
Yeah.
They're...
And they hide in the corners.
They do.
We need to make an invention. We've discussed this before. Right. We need an invention for squishing
a corner-shaped hammer.
Corner-shaped hammer. That's what we need. We're off track.
Yes, we did get off track.
So one of the things that I noticed is that Viserys claims that the throne was taken by treachery. I'm not 100% sure what he's referring to there.
It's a little
because
vague.
His brother, who was the crown prince, was killed in combat.
Right.
By Robert.
Robert, yeah.
That's
the trident.
And his father dies.
Yes. If I were to take a guess, I would assume he's talking about that one.
Yeah, presumably, yeah.
the Kingslayer killing King Aerys. We can't go too much into...
No, we have to be a little bit careful.
He does reference that the Kingslayer is a Lannister.
Yes. We don't know which Lannister is the Kingslayer. And we don't quite know what Kingslayer means, but there are clues in that word, I think.
Yes. I don't believe it was a title he was given by the king. If I get out of control, it's your job. Put me back in my place.
Yeah. So, yeah, we sort of learned Daenerys and Viserys's...
Yes.
That was a spoiler. Viserys's relationship. It's easy to sympathise with Daenerys.
Yeah,
Viserys
definitely.
Is a bit of a bounder, really.
He is, yes. The chapter, its point it revolves around their relationship, basically. Yeah. The things he wants from her and the things she doesn't want to do, but doesn't want to displease him.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think there's an interesting depth to it. The fact that she literally wasn't even born on Westeros itself. I mean, she was born on Dragonstone, which is an island off of Westeros. Right. So she's never even been there and certainly doesn't remember even Dragonstone. And so this whole claim to the Iron Throne for her is just completely abstract. And
Yeah.
Viserys does remember it, and so I can kind of see from his perspective his need to, the burning ambition to get back. She is...
Yeah.
It's so abstract to her that she doesn't see it as the ultimate end game for them. She remembers happier times during their exile.
I feel like it's a major theme of this chapter is the major contrast between their wishes. Viserys is obsessed with winning back his throne and claiming Westeros, and meanwhile Daeny just wants to go back to the big house with the red door and the lemon tree that she considers her home.
Yeah, which is nice, and it's kind of sad for her as well. It's kind of it's easy to be sympathetic with her, or at least relatively sympathetic. Again, I'm not sure that the Targaryens are going to be the heroes of this book.
Right.
So
she's a 13-year-old girl trapped in a tough situation.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, but it becomes clear pretty quickly that she's not much more than a commodity at this point to Viserys that he plans to exploit. He clearly doesn't have a ton of care for her well-being, and I think right off the bat, he lets her know, right at the start of the chapter, that her job is to win the affections of Khal Drogo because he needs an army.
Yeah.
And we know what happens if he displeases her.
Yes.
Well, we don't.
No.
Well, we know what it's called.
It's called Waking the Dragon.
Which, based on his treatment of her before she wakes is
awoken.
I can't imagine that it would be pleasant, her waking the dragon.
The funny thing about it is, I mean, calling losing your temper something just seems like the ultimate sort of like sort of refuge of the douchebag.
Right. That is a major douchebag move. That is something like prototypical douchebag move right there.
You lose your temper, but with me, the dragon.
You're waking the dragon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we learn about how they ended up in Pentos, which is sort of an interesting backstory.
Yeah.
Viserys, at the point where all of the Robert's Rebellion comes to its successful conclusion, so Rhaegar, their brother, is killed.
Yep.
Their father is killed by
the Kingslayer.
Rhaegar's wife and her children are murdered. That's Elia Martell and her children. Which leaves, at that time, Viserys and his mother as the only two living Targaryens. Daeny is in utero at that time, so they're the only two. Daeny and Viserys' mother is also the king's sister, as well as as well as their mother. So both aunt and mother.
Yes.
It's a little bit unpleasant. So they flee to Dragonstone. King's Landing falls to Robert Baratheon's armies, and Dragonstone is fairly impregnable, but also not particularly hospitable.
You're not going to live a lavish life on Dragonstone. It's pretty much a rock.
And then the sort of like perhaps the key to, well, I mean, this is a debatable point, but the key to their relationship might be the fact that Daeny's mother dies in childbirth. That's that clearly is. Viserys is, I mean, his life was in horrible turmoil, and his one fixed point was his mother, and to lose her.
He was 8. Is that right?
I think that's the numbers that how it works out.
Yeah, so
that's pretty rotten for him. But actually, whilst it might underpin their relationship, it seems that the reason for his mistreatment of her is all around his ambition rather than rather than hatred for her because she killed his mother. It's all about his ambition.
Yeah,
really.
she's a commodity, not some. He doesn't seem to have like personal vendetta, hatred toward her.
Yeah,
Right.
and then so they fled from Dragonstone to Essos, which is the other major continent on this world.
Right.
Under the care of Sir William Darry. He was an old man and later dies, leaving them basically as
destitute.
At the mercy of others, basically.
Yeah. They spend the rest of their lives as guests in someone else's home, and he picks up the moniker Beggar King.
Yeah.
Which is not.
Yeah. Which, I mean, of course, if you discount Robert's Rebellion, he is the natural king of Westeros.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. He's. It's pretty legit.
Yeah. His father was the king, and he was the heir. Once Rhaegar was dead, he was the heir. Well, once Rhaegar and his children were dead.
All right, so let's do this. Let's play some word association involving Viserys. I feel like there a lot of words can come to mind when you think of him. You got anything?
Oh, you want me to start? Well, he's pretty cruel.
Yes,
that's for sure.
Obsessed,
and that certainly is part of it. Yeah, he also is kind of like sort of childishly peevish, sort of like just malicious with his revenge on her.
He does seem very childlike in his temperament. He's also rather deluded. Yeah,
I think so. Although, he like we said, he is the rightful king.
Yes,
but recognizing the reality of their situation, he's failing on that. It seems.
Yeah,
he's also very unsure of himself. He's sort of fragile. His ego is enormous but fragile. You sense that some of the things that Illyrio Mopatis says to him, Daeny's picking up that this is just flattery,
right?
And Viserys just can't see it, or he doesn't see it as easily. And that's actually one of the criticisms I have of this chapter a little bit is how one-dimensional he is compared to Daeny.
He is right. He is.
And I think he's
just a bad guy.
He is just
comes off as just a bad guy.
And I think part of it is one of the themes of the book, which is that children of incest are often troubled. I think that's one of the things that comes up again and again in the book as a theme, and so I think that's part of why he's not given too many redeeming qualities, because I think he actually wants to reinforce that if you're a child of incest, there's a chance you're going to be rotten to the core.
Speaking of that, maybe we should discuss a little bit about Targaryens and incest. That is something that they have practiced at least back to Aegon the Conqueror. I assume it goes back to.
And how long is that? Is that
300 years? Yeah. So in the history of Westeros, Targaryens have always, almost not always, but for the vast majority of their marriages, were incestual, and it's because they're the last great house of Valyria, which we'll talk a little more specifically about Valyria in the background. Incest keeps the bloodline pure, is their thinking. However, all of Viserys' talk about pure bloodlines, which she mentions that he talks to her about the importance of keeping pure bloodlines, he's selling her to a barbarian stranger.
That's true. That is true. But maybe he's hoping that no issue comes from that, and that once he's got the throne back, he gets rid of Khal Drogo and takes over.
Yes. Illyrio has a quote. He's referring to Daeny's appearance, and he says that silver gold hair, purple eyes, she is the blood of old Valyria. And that's a traditional Targaryen look.
So is it the Targaryen look or a Valyrian look?
I think both.
Right,
I think it is the typical Targaryen look because it's probably
because of the fall of the doom of Valyria, they are one of the few families left who look like that.
Yes.
I see. Which, I can see why you might want to keep it. But I think if you look at their family tree, and it's a little spoilery to look at the family tree, they are not 100% incestuous. I think.
Correct.
I actually think they're related to Robert. In fact, I think there's a Baratheon not far back in their family tree.
Yes. I believe you are correct. Yeah. One thing that stood out to me because it happened several times in the chapter is Daeny refers to Viserys' borrowed sword. I'm doing finger quotes, which is perfect for a podcast.
We'll learn.
Multiple times she references his borrowed sword for no reason.
Yeah.
Just say his sword. But I wonder if that's intentional in her mind, everything about him is borrowed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it is really. I mean,
Yeah.
they are basically penniless.
So maybe she sees him as a beggar king as well.
Yeah. So, Magister Illyrio Mopatis is an interesting character, sort of super wealthy it seems, but Daeny certainly doesn't trust him. But actually, I was thinking about this a little bit, and her lack of trust for him, whilst understandable, I actually think his motives are pretty clear. You know, he reckons that if he helps this exiled king, should this exiled king ever get back,
right, he's in good graces.
Yeah, exactly, good graces with the king. I don't think he's actually being malicious to them. I think he's,
right.
I just don't think he particularly cares if they succeed.
No, but there's not a lot of investment involved
and
there.
That's the thing. Yeah,
he's got a big house.
Yeah, exactly.
Give him a few rooms, and buy low, sell high.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So it's clear Daeny, she says multiple times, she doesn't trust him.
Right.
And Viserys doesn't come across that he doesn't trust him. He does. He mentions what you just said. Daeny says, "Why is he doing this?" And he says,
"Yeah,
because he knows when I become king, I'll take care of my people."
Right, and that's to Viserys' credit. I mean, he's not just thinking this guy likes me because I'm awesome.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
he's my best friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you notice there's a reference to a Mormont? I just wanted to make sure, because we had a Mormont reference in the prologue as well.
You see, right here, right now, this is the advantage of listening to this podcast. Because if you weren't listening to this podcast, you would not remember that back in the prologue, there was a Mormont mentioned, the Sir Geor Mormont.
Yes.
The Lord Commander of the Night's Watch.
Right. This is not the same. He's not traveling from the Night's Watch over to Pentos.
I do love a wedding. I'll break my vows.
This is Sir Jorah Mormont. He is the son of Sir Geor Mormont. Geor being the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Yeah. Sir Jorah, an exiled knight.
Uh-huh.
So just wanted to point that out and make sure the difference was understood.
Other thing to notice, that there seems to be a different primary religion here on Essos.
Yes, right.
We're talking about these red priests of the Lord of Light. That I didn't get a mention on Westeros, so I'm not sure it's the primary religion of Essos, but certainly seems to be prevalent here in...
yes.
Although I think she mentioned it in more than Pentos. I think she actually mentioned seeing the red priests in a different city as well, so it seems that it is the most important religion here in Essos.
Caitlin did not mention it when she was comparing the old gods in the faith.
No, yeah.
So might not have much of a foothold on Westeros.
Yeah. My personal favourite part of the entire chapter is Viserys listing the families that he believes would be loyal to his cause, because I think that's where the story's got some real interest for me. Is what I love about the story is the sort of political intrigue and the sort of like the families sort of like jockeying for position,
like a Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I suppose so. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. So he mentions the Tyrells, the Redwynes, the Darrys, the Greyjoys, and the Martells.
Right.
And they have their reasons. We'll talk about that a little bit more.
Yes.
I really like that. I mean, it's a lot to keep up with because there's this proliferation of families and characters. Some of those on that list are going to be important in the story, and some are not.
Right.
So it's again just sort of building that richness to it, which I really enjoy.
There's a lot of houses that get talked about. Yeah.
The other thing is that they mentioned the skulls of dragons adorning King's Landing.
What?
And if there's skulls of dragons, that would mean there would be dragons, presumably.
Right.
Or at least there had been dragons.
So that's a third mystical entity
in
that
as
we're
many
dealing
chapters.
With. Yes.
It's crazy. Okay. Apparently this is not our world. Alright, so in comparison with the TV show, it's a little bit different. Daeny meets Khal Drogo in a separate encounter. She meets him 2 times, basically, in the TV show. Once for him to sort of inspect her and decide whether or not he wants her. The other thing, the bigger thing, I think, is that the Dothraki are nomadic people. They seem to be more nomadic in the book. More nomadic in the TV show.
Right.
Khal Drogo has a large manse in Pentos with 200 rooms.
Yeah.
There was no sense of that in the TV show.
I would like one of those.
Pentos looks nice. Yes.
Yeah.
We never saw any Dothraki in anything more substantial than a tent in TV shows. So it's interesting that's a difference.
Yeah. And you noticed a difference in timeline. In full disclosure, I currently do not have access to HBO. So Simon's doing all of the comparison with the TV show. All I can base it on is my memory. Because
Yeah, so almost all of the young characters in the book have been aged slightly for the TV show,
right.
with the exception of the literal children, the Stark children and Robert's children as well. They're of the right age. So almost nobody then.
Yeah.
Almost nobody's been aged.
Right. Well, Rickon's supposed to be 3.
Right. And so we did notice that John and Rob were both a little bit older.
Yeah.
I mean, the actors were older than the characters were supposed to be. But in a Stranger version, Viserys is actually younger in the show than he was in the book. So by our reckoning, he would have been 21 in the book. But he claims to have been waiting 17 years for his throne.
Yeah,
So-
I had a thought. I was just wondering if, for the TV show, it's going to a mass TV audience and maybe making Daeny. I don't remember what age they made her, if they even said what age she
they
was in the
avoided it,
TV
yeah.
show, but 13-year-old bride might be a bit much for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
TV audience to
Yeah.
take.
Illyrio Mopatis is not quite as
Yeah.
revolting a character. I
Right.
mean, physically revolting a character.
When I was reading the chapter, and Daeny refers to rolls of fat that jiggled as he walked, and Daeny could smell the stench of Illyrio's pallid flesh through his heavy perfumes, not painting a very pretty picture.
No, not exactly.
And so I was like, I don't remember what this character looked like. So I pulled him up, and I was like, what? That's disappointing, and he doesn't even have the fancy yellow forked beard.
Yeah, that's true. So, non-spoiler background information. So,
Got a lot.
we do have a lot this time. So, Rhaegar is the elder brother of Viserys and Daeny. He was crown prince behind his father, Aerys II. He himself was killed by Robert Baratheon during Robert's rebellion. So we learned that a Lannister killed the king. We're not sure which one.
Right.
We also heard about Unsullied, which is actually off a different topic here. When they arrive at Khal Drogo's manse, they meet someone who they described as Unsullied, and then Viserys refers to him as a eunuch.
Right.
So I'm not 100% sure what the Unsullied are, but apparently they are.
At least this
Yeah.
one is a eunuch.
Yeah.
Yep. We get a little geography lesson on Essos. They mention the free cities, and there are 9 free cities that are found in the west of the continent of Essos, which is the continent to the east of Westeros, which,
Got it.
well named, Westeros is to the west
Yeah.
of Essos. They're separated by the narrow sea, and they're called free cities because they are their own city-states. All but one, which is Braavos, was founded by the Valyrian freehold.
Interesting. So the Narrow Sea is not completely well named. I mean, it's a couple of 100 miles. I think. It's not like it's not an ocean,
Right.
but it's not like
A river.
small channel. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's you'd have to make a conscious decision to sail across it.
Yes.
Which is why the first men are the first men, because
Yeah.
if it was just a river,
There'd be
everyone
lots of
would
them.
have been spilling across it. Yes.
They'd have to go way back
Yeah.
to find the first men.
So Valyria is a city full of magic and dragon riders.
I liked last week, your reference to, now I forget it, Atlantis.
Atlantis. I really struggled. Yes,
Yeah.
I really struggled with that.
I had never thought of that, but that's
Yeah.
a very good analogy. Anyway, continue.
So it was the capital of the Valyrian freehold, which controlled much of Essos. It was destroyed during an event known as the Doom of Valyria, presumably some kind of tectonic thing.
Yes.
Most of what made Valyria so powerful was lost in the Doom. The only dragon riders who escaped were the Targaryens, who then moved to Dragonstone, which was just off the coast of Westeros. They'd moved there 12 years prior to the Doom, in fact.
Yeah, that was kind of their summer home, I guess. That was a place they went to.
Interesting.
But interestingly, the Targaryens were considered a lesser house of Valyria.
Well, Lesser House of Valyria is still greater house of everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we hear about Dragonstone. And we have referenced it a little bit, that it's not exactly a place you'd want to stay for too long. It's, as I just said, it's the original Westerosi seat of House Targaryen. And after Aegon's conquest, roughly 300 years prior to the start of our story here, the seat of Targaryen power moved to King's Landing. However, the Targaryens still consider Dragonstone an important stronghold. The heir apparent to the king is usually called the Prince of Dragonstone.
They refer to Daeny as the Princess of Dragonstone when they arrive at Khal Drogo's.
Right.
So, yeah, we mentioned the four houses that Viserys referenced, so just a bit of background on them. The Tyrells. House Tyrell is one of the great houses of the Seven Kingdoms. They are the lords paramount of the Manda and liege lords of the Reach. They're second only to the Lannisters in wealth in Westeros. Their seat is Highgarden, which was once the seat of rule in Westeros. The Reach has very fertile lands which generate their wealth. The sigil is a gold rose on a green field. Their words are growing strong. The current lord is Mace Tyrell.
And we learned about the Redwynes. Their home is also in the Reach, and they owe fealty to the Tyrells. Conveniently enough, their seat is in the Arbor.
A hotbed of Targaryenism.
Right. Yes, yeah, the Reach. Their seat is in the Arbor, which is an island off the southwest coast of Westeros. They're known for their wine production, which is pretty important in Westeros. Oh, and it is the best. It's known as the best wine in Westeros. They also have the largest fleet in the Seven Kingdoms, which makes them pretty important allies. Their sigil is Burgundy grape cluster on blue. And oddly, one of the few houses without words.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. And their lord is Paxter Redwyne. Maybe they were partaking too much in the
possibly.
wine to...
The words were slurred, yes.
I don't know what they're saying.
Interesting that they have the largest fleet in the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah.
I'm surprised to hear that. I mean, I would have thought that it was the Greyjoys. I would have thought that being from the Iron Islands and being what they are, they would have the larger fleet. Maybe just... but numerically, it's a smaller place.
Yes, I would think that would have something to do with it. We'll get to the Greyjoys in a minute, but
So, House Darry makes its home in the Riverlands. They were once a very prominent house of the Trident until the fall of the Targaryens. They really stuck by the Targaryens, and they were punished for it when Robert succeeded. They actually fought against Robert Baratheon and against their own liege lord, because Hoster Tully would have been there. Being from the Riverlands, they owed their fealty to Tully's, and so they fought against him.
Right.
Their sigil's a black ploughman on brown. Their lord is Lady Maria Darry, presumably somebody who's been put in place at the expense of whoever was removed from there for their...
I'm guessing that was Willem Darry, who
Okay.
was...
Oh, the one who rescued
Yes,
the
he
kids.
was referenced
Right,
by Daenerys, who she seemed to be fond of him, and he's the one that helped them get from Dragonstone over to Essos. So, House Greyjoy is another of the great houses of the Seven Kingdoms. They rule a group of islands off the west coast of Westeros called the Iron Islands. It's a rather barren archipelago with very little fertile land. They reave and plunder for much of what they have. I read that had reap. You're like, what?
Literally the opposite of what they do.
Whoops, meant reave. They reave and plunder. That's kind of their thing. Their seat is called Pike, and their sigil is a golden kraken on a black field, which is a pretty cool sigil.
That is a cool sigil.
And their words are, "We do not sow," which
Or reap.
Right. We do not sow or reap. Their lord is Balon Greyjoy.
So the other house that didn't get mentioned by name but by implication is the Martells of Dawn. They're the most obvious ally of the Targaryens because their daughter, Elia Martell, was married to Rhaegar. See?
Right.
They're not all incestuous. Yes?
Right, yes.
And she was murdered along with her two children when King's Landing fell. None of that can sit too well with the Martells, I would imagine.
Yes,
They're part of the Seven Kingdoms. They owe their fealty to King Robert, but that's got a sting.
In this instance, well, with these houses, I think Viserys is probably right on most of them.
I would think so.
They all have an axe to grind against the Baratheons.
Yeah, but I would think that the stronger ones would be the Martells, the Greyjoys, and the Darrys.
Yes.
I think that the Redwynes and the Tyrells are probably rich and successful enough to not really care who's in charge. They just want stability so they continue to be wealthy. I don't think, but it sort of depends on what their own ambitions are. You know, their ambitions. You know, what would your ambition be if you're already the second richest family in Westeros?
Right.
You know, so that I would imagine that their fealty is fairly fungible and not too.
Whoever's sitting the Iron Throne, as long as they get to maintain their
Exactly.
Oh, there.
Well said. Thank you. That's what I was trying to say. Pedantry. There's very little pedantry, I'm afraid. I just, like I said, I thought Viserys could be a bit more nuanced.
Right.
I was a little bit surprised. I have to be careful of spoilers here, but I was very surprised to see that the Dothraki would hire an Unsullied. They pride themselves on being on their own sort of combat prowess.
I hadn't even thought of that until you just mentioned that right now.
It's a little bit strange because later we're going to discover that the Unsullied have their own military prowess, and so the fact that the Dothraki hired them seems just a bit odd to me. But
that's a good point. I had not thought of that.
What did you say about what arrived before?
We've got mail.
What?
Yes, we do. Woo! We're off and running with our correspondences from our listeners.
Go on then.
So we have we have an email, and the subject of the email is surname question, and I think this has to do with the terrible job I did in episode 2 of trying to explain why Jon is a bastard.
Do you want me to leap to your defense here? No, McKenna, you did fine.
I basically explained what a bastard is. I don't know that I did a very good job of
even that.
I did a not so great job explaining what makes a bastard.
Used to understand what a bastard was.
No, I'm totally lost. So she first says some really nice things about our podcast. Which,
don't read those out.
Yes,
we'll keep those to ourselves.
Right. What she does want to know is, she says, I would like to know more about surnames and bastards. In episode 2, you mentioned that Jon Snow is a bastard because he isn't the son of Eddard and his wife. Is that it, or is there more to it? Which was what I was trying so poorly to do. Also, do people who aren't lords and ladies have surnames? This is from Lisa, who hails from Rochester, New York.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. So, may I try again?
Please.
First of all,
our editing skills have improved, so we should be able to get this down to 5 minutes.
No, people who are not lords and ladies, who are also referred to as small folk. Lisa admits she's just starting into this world, so she wouldn't know that yet. Small folk do not have traditional last names as we would consider last names. They can use the area where they're from as a sort of surname. For example, Tom from Flea Bottom, which is a poor section in King's Landing. But otherwise, Tom would just be Tom, or maybe Tom the Butcher. Now to the bastard part of the question. Aside from being born from unwed parents, which I did convey, I believe, in episode 2, this is where I stopped conveying. A bastard must be recognized by his lord father, which I believe you mentioned. If that happens, the child is given the name assigned to the bastards of lords from that particular region. So in the north, it's Snow. So Jon is Jon Snow. There's others such as the Crownlands are water, and the Reach are flowers, and so on and so forth.
The Riverlands are rivers.
Yes, they are.
Was that it? Oh, good.
Well, yeah.
Well, thank you.
I could keep going, but I think I think I got it. I hope I answered your question, Lisa.
So basically, you're telling me that ordinary people don't even have surnames, so their being a bastard or not is neither here nor there.
Yes, they don't get a fake last name.
And you only get the standard last name, the Snow, the rivers, the waters, if you're recognized as a bastard.
Yes.
I see. Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
Precisely.
So, notes and corrections. In the Catelyn chapter, we failed to notice that the fact that Lisa Arryn had fled the capital was in the book, but in the TV, that news was postponed to a later scene between Ned and Cat, and seen as much more portentous news in the TV show.
Right, I do remember that scene.
Yeah.
Right. We're still pretty far early into episode 1 of the TV show. Right?
Yeah, a lot of this is still in episode 1.
Yeah. I know where episode 1 ends, and we're not there yet.
Not there yet.
So
that's true.
Yeah.
I had to think back then, but yeah, I do too. Okay, I think we've talked about all we need to talk about here.
Yeah,
we?
I think so.
So it's beginning to get really fun now. I think you're going to see how the bigger feces, the bigger pieces of the story are beginning to fit together. The Targaryens versus the Baratheons, the old regime versus the new.
Right. We've met what's left of the former most powerful house in all of Westeros. Now just 2 youngsters living off the generosity of others and pseudo hiding.
Yeah.
That's
And they themselves could not be more different from one another, although
really,
physically similar.
For physically, that's where it ends.
They have that Valyrian look.
Yes.
We learn about the unusual Targaryen traditions and idiosyncrasies, incest being okay, and considering themselves to be dragons.
They do. Yeah. Most places have a sigil. A lot of them have an animal. Yeah. They take it to another level. Yeah.
I think one of their ancestors drinks dragon fire, thinking that it wouldn't kill him. Only to be immediately and irrevocably disabused.
That didn't work at all. And we started to learn about Essos and some of their customs and histories. They have painted hair, they like lavish clothes, and they have slaves that aren't slaves, that are considered servants, but they are basically slaves. And there's also these barbarian Dothrakis that we're just starting to find out about. They sound pretty interesting.
Ooh, I thought it was interesting that they lived side by side with them. I mean, what Mopardis said about the Khal Drogo's mans was that the citizens of Pentos believed that the city was safe from the Dothrakis because of the Lord of Light protecting them, but that they made peace with them anyway just to avoid any conflict. It was interesting. Interesting that they have
easier to just pay them off or something like that.
So a continent full of cities that are wealthy and not particularly military and raving lunatics, it seems.
What could go wrong there?
So that's all for this episode.
Yep.
Please subscribe if you're enjoying it. We'd love to hear from you at ghosts.harrenhall@gmail.com.
That's ghost plural.
Ghost plural.
Yes.
And Harrenhall doesn't end in a double L.
No.
It ends in one L.
One L.
It has a double R in it. Okay.
All right.
Until next time, thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.